On this episode of the AAF Exchange, a sovereign wealth fund, trade wars, and the state of regulation. Joining us to discuss all of this, AAF President Douglas Holtz-Eakin, Trade Policy Analyst Jacob Jensen, and Director of Regulations Dan Goldbeck. First up, Doug, thanks for joining us.
Always a pleasure. Always a pleasure.
So before we get into everything that we want to talk about today, what's been on your mind recently?
Doge.
Big one.
Doge is very interesting. Obviously, politically fairly charged right now, but it has been transformed. It was originally an outside body, which would give advice to the Office of Management and Budget. That's how it was originally advertised. It then was transformed by an executive order to be an element of the federal government. There was an existing United States digital service that was renamed the Department of Government Efficiency, and the executive order gives those Doge employees, they're about 20, access to information systems and technologies across the agencies. And so there's been some controversy about the Treasury, for example. There's no question that if you read the executive order, they have access to those systems. And its mandate is to modernize technologies and information systems. That's a far cry from de facto shutting down USAID or something like that. So I'm quite unclear as to exactly what the actual portfolio that Doge has in the president's mind. It's far from obvious what the authorities are. I don't see how Doge can unilaterally not spend money that Congress has appropriated. That's a clearly big issue. So I'm puzzled about Doge, and people are going to agree or disagree on their objectives with USAID or anything else, but the process to me is completely legally and politically unclear. Like, what are they up to?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I remember when this first was announced back in November, I think it was, you had written it looked like it was just going to be a think tank.
Yeah. Not anymore.
Yeah, and now it seems like it has real power and real, at least under the president has given it some sort of an agenda, because
it was giving employees a budget and a task. I mean,
right.
The task doesn't seem to match what they're up to.
Yeah. It's interesting because like you said, a lot of it's capturing all the attention right now, and a lot of this. But at the end of the day, still has to go. I mean, you can't just turn off funding. Congress has already appropriated that funding, right? I mean, that's the debate they want.
Certainly, on the campaign, and since his first presidency, there's been talk about challenging the Budget Control Act, the Impoundment Act, and what they're doing now is impounding funds.
Yeah,
they are not requesting rescissions from Congress. They are just not spending the money, and that'll be a court fight, and I think they want that fight.
Well, we'll have to wait and see how that all plays out.
Yes.
All right, let's move on to another one of President Trump's proposals. He's proposed the Sovereign Wealth Fund on the campaign, and again, just a few days ago.
Again, with an executive order.
Yeah, another executive order. What is it, and why is it being proposed?
So a Sovereign Wealth Fund is something that we've seen around the world. So Norway has a sovereign wealth fund where you take the revenues from their oil rigs off the shore, deposit in the sovereign fund, and invest it in things. Saudis have a big sovereign wealth fund. It's usually associated with natural resources. Alaska has a sovereign wealth fund. They pay out every year coming off the Alaska oil. It's not unprecedented, but it's usually used in a situation where, number one, you have to deal with some sort of surplus, and you've got a surplus on the budget or something like that, and you have to figure out what to do with it. That's not our problem by any means, and also it gives you the ability to do more things, undertake more kinds of activities, and everything that the president has ever mentioned about the Sovereign Wealth Fund. Well, we could do some infrastructure with it. Well, we just did the bipartisan infrastructure bill. We could influence other countries. Well, we just did the, quote, BUILD Act, and we have the International Development Finance Corporation designed to counter Chinese influence around the globe. We have DARPA if we want advanced defense technologies. We have NIH if we want advanced medical cures. There's nothing that he's ever said about what he wants to accomplish with the Sovereign Wealth Fund that we don't have the ability to do already. So it brings nothing new that I can identify to the policy table.
Yeah.
and we don't have any money. So this seems bad to me.
Right, yeah. I mean, yeah, you've called this the bankrupt idea. It's a bankrupt idea. That's how you've described it, I think, in your dish earlier this week. Yeah. I mean, so what are elaborate on some of those key concerns in that?
Well, I mean, the key concerns, number one, it's a solution in search for a problem. Like, what problem are we trying to solve here? From a policy perspective, there's no problem to be solved by this. Number two, the promise is, among others, this will help us with our low taxes and fiscal sustainability. That's in the executive order. Well, to put the money in the sovereign wealth fund, you're going to have to tax somebody. So taxes are going up, not down, because of the sovereign wealth fund. And it doesn't have anything to do with controlling the growth of Social Security and Medicare, which are the necessary conditions for fiscal sustainability, which he has taken off the table. And so it's the usual, here's a set of promises. This actually has nothing to do with any of that set of promises. The only thing I can see that is appealing about a sovereign wealth fund, which explains why both President Trump and his predecessor, President Biden, both talked about having one, is that it is money that is theirs to spend how they want without congressional appropriation or oversight. Great, mad money for the president. They can go out and have a field day. I don't think so. That's not how we're set up. That's not our system. So I'm not really a fan.
Yeah, I mean, I think when he was talking about it earlier this week, he talked about buying TikTok, and which obviously brings up First Amendment concerns. But,
it's a terrible idea.
But I mean, it just seems like a slush fund for the executive to do
that's
without congressional oversight.
And there are tiny precedents. There is something in the Treasury called the Exchange Stabilization Fund from back when we had fixed exchange rates and the Treasury was responsible for maintaining those exchange rates. And so they'd have to go in and buy and sell foreign currencies to stabilize the dollar's exchange rate. So that's always been there. And it's just a slush fund, and they end up using it for all sorts of things that have nothing to do with exchange stabilization. And it's maddening for anyone who has sort of an adherence to the budgeting process. So I'm not a fan of creating more slush funds.
So final question, who you got this weekend?
Oh, I'm picking the Chiefs. The key being everyone knows how to beat the Eagles. You have to stop Saquon Barkley and make Jalen Hurts beat you. That's all there is to it. No one else can do it. I think the Chiefs can do it. Right? They have a game wrecker in Jones. He can do that, and I'm not worried about them scoring enough points. They will score just enough points to win.
Yeah,
it's not going to be a blowout by any means.
Don't ask me. I can't get the words out on what I want to say.
What you want to say is Doug is always right.
No, I want to say I got the Eagles to win, but oh god, that just hurts saying. We're gonna end it there because I can't talk anymore.
Okay,
thanks, Doug.
You bet.
Let's turn to Tariff Watch and bring in Jacob Jensen. Welcome back.
Great to be back.
It's been a little while.
Yep, been busy times.
Yeah. I'm excited to talk about today's topic because it's been all over the news recently.
Yeah.
You've certainly been an avid tweeter about this recently.
Yeah.
I think I told you on Sunday I looked at AAF's Twitter feed and it was just all you. I'm like, Jacob.
I know. It was a busy weekend for sure.
Yeah. So let's talk about some of that. At the end of last week, President Trump announced he was moving forward with a proposed 25% tariff on Canada and Mexico and a 10% tariff on China. He has since paused Canada and Mexico. So let's start there. What happened there?
Yeah, so this all really started on February 1st when President Trump signed into action the multiple executive orders on Mexico, Canada, and China, which would implement tariffs on February 4th. Mm-hmm. So it was expected that the tariffs would go into effect that day, but he wanted to buy some time, some negotiating room from Mexico and Canada. So instead of the tariffs going into effect that day, they were delayed just a few hours. And this is mainly because he wanted to avoid retaliation from both Canada and Mexico, who immediately responded with tariffs of their own that they would announce. But the biggest takeaway from February 1st is that these tariffs were justified under the International Emergency Economic Powers Act. And for those of you who don't know, it's referred to as IEPA. And this grants the president vast economic powers, such as sanctions and whatnot, in times of crisis to respond to a national emergency. And so that was declared. This is the first time, though, that tariffs would be implemented as a response to IEPA.
Interesting. So the crisis, of course, was probably in response to what he was claiming it was fentanyl crisis.
Yeah, fentanyl and illegal immigration.
Illegal immigration.
Yeah.
Interesting. So what, they have now a month to figure out
Right.
a bigger agreement on this. I know, like, Mexico said that they would send 10,000 troops to the border. Canada said some other things. So about a month now?
Yeah, so on February 3rd, they reached some agreements. Mexico agreed to send National Guard to the border, and then their tariffs got delayed by a month. A few hours later, Canada came to the table. They announced a new border security package. They're going to send 10,000 officers, among a few other things, and their tariffs were delayed by a month. But it's worth mentioning that, at least in the case of Canada, they had already proposed a lot of these concessions ahead of time, and so they're not really new, at least right now, yeah.
So, all right, we'll probably be back in a month to discuss what happened again. But let's turn to China for now. That 10% tariff went into effect.
Right.
What can we expect?
So if there's no deal reached with China in the near term, there's going to be consumer cost increases for sure. It's a 10% across the board tariff. That comes out to about a cost of $25 to $40 billion annually for U.S. consumers, which broken down is about $200 per household per year, which is not a small increase at all. Xi Jinping was supposed to meet with Trump the other day. Apparently their call never materialized, and China responded with retaliatory tariffs as well.
Yeah, what were those retaliatory tariffs? How did they react in that way?
Yeah, so just like 10 minutes or so after our tariffs went into effect, they announced a whole host of retaliation. 10% on U.S. oil, agricultural equipment, and a few other goods. 15% on U.S. natural gas and coal, along with export bans on tungsten materials, which China produces 80% of all tungsten. That's a pretty big deal. And they're going to do a probe into Google and perhaps Apple. So a whole lot of things.
Yeah, and what about this package thing? I saw like this package thing was coming into play.
Right. So the United States, alongside our 10% tariffs, removed the de minimis privilege of China. And for those of you who, again, don't know what de minimis is, it affects almost every U.S. household every year. Any package or shipment that enters the United States under a certain value, so low value shipments, don't have to pay tariffs or fees, so it lowers consumer costs. And that was eliminated for China, which China's the biggest user of that.
Right. So is this going to affect my Amazon packages?
It definitely could, and it'll probably raise the costs pretty significantly.
Interesting. So it's hopefully. So how do they get past these tariffs? Is there some agreement that they have to come to? Is that what he's looking for? Or is he just looking to completely decouple us from China? What are the goal of these tariffs being put on here?
At least for right now, it's really up in the air. There's no stated goal like China do this and we will remove the tariffs. We're really just gonna have to wait and see till probably February 10th. Interesting.
Well, I don't know. That's all I had on tariffs, but I don't know if do you have a pick for this weekend's Super Bowl?
I do not. I guess let's wait and see, just like the tariffs.
Yeah. Fair enough. Well, Jacob, thanks for coming on.
Great. Thanks for having me.
Finally, turning back to regulations, and Dan Goldbeck, welcome back.
Hey, thanks for having me.
We've certainly heard a lot from you in the past year on regulations.
Sure.
It's been a very busy 4 years for you, and probably will not slowing down at all.
Nope.
So before we look ahead to everything that will happen, I want to look back at sort of the Biden administration's regulatory legacy. What are the key things we should know?
Sure. So won't really come as any surprise for those that follow our work tracking, week in regulations, Reg Rodeo, that the Biden administration finished with $1.8 trillion in regulatory costs. That's trillion with a T. It's a pretty remarkable record. You compare it to the first Trump term was about $112 billion. The first Obama term was just under $500 billion. And really, if you actually compare it to the full Obama term, so 2 terms of Obama was just under $900 billion in total costs. So basically, agencies under Biden had regulatory costs that were twice the level of Obama's in half the time. It's a pretty remarkable record, and I doubt, obviously Trump's second term here won't even come close to touching it. It'll take a lot for any future administration to really touch that, I think.
Yeah, it was quite remarkable. I mean, I think almost every other podcast I brought up the regulatory number to either Doug or you or something like that, and it was astonishing how much it was. A lot of this stemmed from they said in the beginning this was going to, I remember that memo that they had in day one. I don't know if it was a memo or that basically they were going to change the way they did regulations and that, and a lot of that.
Yeah, they had some changes to how they did analysis. Those are now going by the wayside with the incoming administration.
Right.
So, I don't know, it had some limited impact, but I think it was more the volume and the nature of the rules that came out more so. You had, of course, the main one was the EPA tailpipe emissions rule for passenger vehicles, but even then you had another roughly $500 billion or so from EPA itself, just alone. And then you had, of course, plenty of others, particularly hitting last spring. You had a series of rules in the billions of dollars, and I think that, everyone sort of understands that to be the past administration getting those rules out ahead of the window for the CRA to make sure that they're at least safe from quick removal under CRA. Obviously, the new administration come in and, rescind those administratively. It'll just take a lot more time.
Interesting. All right. So, yeah, speaking of the new administration, let's look ahead a little bit. President Trump, I believe it's on the website now, has proposed a 10-to-1 regulatory plan. What do we know about this plan and how will it work?
Sure. So the 10-to-1, so 10 rules out for everyone in. It's based upon this campaign pledge he made, back during the election. It's kind of it's expansion. It's an expanded version of the regulatory budget program under his first term. The original goal for that was 2 out for everyone, and they sort of expanded that in ensuing years, and now just plowing forward with 10-to-1. The other aspect of this that's sort of expanding it and making it more aggressive is they're going beyond just the typical notice and comment rulemakings that we track that hit the Federal Register and everything. They're including things like guidance documents, agency memoranda. So they have a more aggressive goal, but they're also casting this wider net. And it'll be interesting to see, the thing that I'm most concerned about with it, the thing that I'll be following a lot is what's the actual cost attached to these rules. You'll have a situation where, say, Department of Homeland Security wants to impose this really restrictive immigration rule that will have costs attached to it. They're going to need to go find, a deregulatory action that has cost savings that are requisite to that, and then are they going to just load up a bunch of random memoranda and guidance documents as sort of as draft picks as part of the trade of sorts? Are they going to be able to go in, because the thing is with these sort of other documents, they typically don't have a cost estimate attached to them when they're put out. And so are they going to go back and do sort of an ad hoc estimate of what the impact of these could be? It remains to be seen. So I think we'll see in coming weeks and months how they're really going to account for all this in terms of, they reached the 10-to-1 goal, but the devil's going to be sort of in the details of what's the actual impact of these rules and items that they're repealing.
Interesting. Well, I'm sure I'm going to can I just book you right now for a future podcast? Like, maybe
sure.
We might have to do one a month at this point, but no, probably not that bad. But yeah, we're definitely going to be talking about this all year. And as we learn more, because again, they're just starting the whole 10-to-1 plan. We'll have to see how it goes.
Yeah, I mean, we're going to see, thing is with these, non-rulemaking items is it took just some agency head's signature to put them in place. It'll take whoever is taking that role in this new administration, citing some documents saying we repeal this. So those are going to be some of the first ones to go. You're also going to see the Congressional Review Act with CRA. Those are going to be probably the most significant initial actions, because it's essentially just Congress voting down some of the final Biden rules and then Trump signing those and rescinding them based upon his signature. So those are going to be the main items early on, and then as we go into ensuing years, we'll see kind of some of the more significant items perhaps.
Yeah, and you are working on a great new tool to track those. It's an improved tool, I should say, not a new one. We did it in the last Congress, but that should be launching in the next week or so.
Yeah.
So hopefully that'll be good for people to just follow along.
Yeah, so we had in past years CRA tracker. That sort of just was a list of resolutions that Congress filed under the past administration. Obviously, Biden wasn't going to allow any of his rules to be rescinded under the CRA. And so we have the situation now where, similar to start of 2017 and also start of 2021 with the Biden administration and Democratic control of Congress, they repealed a handful of Trump rules then under the CRA. And so I think you'll see a pretty aggressive couple of months here of Congress and then Trump signing off on the CRA resolutions that would essentially repeal rules straight up.
Yep. All right. Well, we'll have to tune in and keep watching.
Sure.
But before I let you go, who do you got Sunday?
Go Birds.
I agree with you, but I can't get the words out because I don't want the argument between Patrick Mahomes and Brady. So
I'm married to an Eagles fan, and as a Niners fan myself, the enemy of my enemy is my friend after what the Chiefs did the past few years. So
I hear you
go
there.
Birds.
I hear you there. Well, Dan, thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thanks.